follows an extract from my book Fête Fatale, available from Amazon. Chapter 9, Part 3. The bell sounded that drinking up time was finished, and gradually the bar emptied out into the street. Beth, Drew, Jonty and Matt made their way home. Once inside, Beth made a saucepan of her signature concoction of milk, cocoa powder, malt extract and vanilla for them to drink before bed. The four of them sat around the kitchen table in their pyjamas, nursing their bedtime drinks. "I was just talking to Gareth about John Barlow's state of affairs," said Beth. "I'm not sure he should be talking to you about such things. Isn't that against the accountancy Hippocratic oath?" said Drew. "Oh, I disarmed him by reassuring him that I wasn't digging for information." "But you were though, weren't you?" said Jonty. "You know me too well. Of course I was," said Beth. "I wasn't really lying though. What we discussed was more or less common knowledge anyway." "More or less," said Matt. "Gareth didn't reveal any facts or figures. It's only what we'd all guessed. But it did shed a different light on things. He pretty well said that John felt ashamed at business being a bit tight. I've had quite a disturbing thought. You don't think that John would commit suicide, do you?" "Crikey, Beth, whatever makes you say that?" said Drew. "Well, people do, don't they? It's no use saying he'd never do such a thing, because that's what everybody says, and yet people still go and kill themselves. Those left behind spend the rest of their life wondering why and still clinging to the hope that it didn't really happen, when it obviously did. It's easy for others to say that matters are never that bad, but it's not really the facts that carry the weight. It's all about that person's perspective. We might say, 'Oh, don't worry, you're still super rich,' but it doesn't necessarily cut through, does it?" said Beth. "I take your point, Beth, but there must be more to your reasoning than just 'it could happen,'" said Drew. "As I said, Gareth hasn't told me anything new. I just got the impression that the problem was more to do with John's attitude than the actual financial situation. Although business wasn't booming, it seems that there were measures he could have easily taken but didn't. Perhaps the fact that somehow everybody knew his affairs didn't exactly help matters either. He'd been actively advised to take certain steps, but apparently he couldn't bring himself to do so. Gareth seemed to think that the imagined shame of failure was overwhelming John, and action may have implied defeat or failure. If you think about it, if money was tight, then the obvious practical steps would be to sell off some property. That's quite a public thing, especially if it means selling off their own holiday home in France, which Jean is so proud of. Do you think that he'd worry about his image in the village to that extent? It surely couldn't be just that. Maybe the thought of having to face Jean with the prospect of downsizing or selling the house in France was too humiliating for him. I suspect that's more likely. It's still not that drastic, though. They'd still be really well off from what I can gather," said Beth. "They are valid points, Mum," said Jonty. "I think that John could be quite sensitive. I do hope that you're wrong. He was such a lovely chap. He always used to make jokes about my trombone, saying that it was just a penny whistle with too much ego." I'd never given such an explanation a thought until just now, but something in Gareth's tone gave away the emotional struggle that John must have been facing. I don't think Gareth realised what he was saying, and he didn't seem to think he was telling me anything new. I'll have a talk to Benji about it sometime, though I'm sure he'll have considered it," said Beth. They placed the empty mugs in the sink and said good night to each other. Each sleepy individual then made their way to bed. Beth glanced into the kitchen and wished that she didn't have to face each new day with a sink full of last night's dirty dishes. As they'd been chatting, Matt had made a plate of toast and had liberally smeared it with a jar of Emma's lemon curd. Now a chopping board and some sticky knives lay strewn across a crumb-ridden surface. It would be a matter of minutes to stash the dishes into the dishwasher, but the saucepan would have to soak in soapy water for a while to get rid of the burnt milk at the bottom of the pan. The dishwasher had finished its cycle while they were out at the pub and was now fully stocked with gleaming dishes to be put away, and she wasn't starting that job at midnight. She shrugged her shoulders and switched off the lights. For once she'd make sure that she went to bed at the same time as her husband. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't such a travesty. After cleaning her teeth, Ben climbed into bed next to Drew and snuggled up close. "Nothing can be that bad, really, can it?" she asked. Drew didn't answer but kissed her forehead and put his arm around her to hug her as they both fell asleep. For the full book of Fête Fatale, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.